I will be putting the preamble for this particular first lecture. Then Venkatesh Bhat would be joining with the slides and the PowerPoint on the specific aspects of this. So let me start with two things. The session today is Millets and Sorghum, the new staples and more. And I don't know why we are calling it as a new staples. In fact, they are our heritage staples. And we are trying to find them again, reinvent them, because we have all been troubled by malnutrition, the obesity, and the hidden hunger. The issue here is, why do we really are in the effort to reinvent them? We are in the effort to reinvent them basically for the fact that this planet is plagued by two important aspects. One is flooding, another is drought. And the climate change has been a reality which we are all seeing across the globe, that the failure of crops, the high hunger, plus the burden of the hidden hunger that we are carrying forward across years. In India, we really take pride of the fact that the Green Revolution created the food security. But that was important because we were with the begging bowl at that time, but we have the buffer stocks today. The issue today is not the fact of having food per se, but the issue is having it distributed equally and unequivocally. The factor that we are trying to really look at as Indian Institute of Millets Research is how the millets can really come back to their own glory, which they occupied in India about 40 million hectares all put together. Today we stand at about 12 million hectares, producing about 11.5 to 12 million tons of food grains. Sorghum and pearl millet constitute the uh, bulk of it, 80 to 90%, and 10% all put together are small millets. So almost, of course, finger millet has a bit of substantial area. So our idea here is how we can make crop colonies that can support both rural and urban population in terms of providing nutrition to all. Mainstreaming these millets to the food plate depends on how we generate the demand. So demand really triggers the way the area expansion can happen. So the topic now is how they are good for planet, how they are good for the farmers. Because it is always said our studies in terms of analysis of drought years and the income to the farmers, it has analyzed the fact that these crops are insurance by themselves because they complete their life cycle in short period of time when there are periods of drought, and the crops like cotton, corn in the areas where they cannot sustain better when there is a very less amount of water or rainfall, these crops fail, and that's how we have seen globally and even in India the kind of farmer suicides, the uh, fact of not getting the incomes from these crops, including cotton and maize, in severe drought, is supported by the fact that these millets have provided the livelihood security, nutrition security, and food security in the drought situations. That's how these crops, which require less than 450 to 500 millimeters of water, are the crops which are short duration in nature, full of nutrition dense profile in the grains what they have, but they provide also the fodder, or even the green fodder or the dry store, what we call them, for the nutrition security of the country for the cattle. So the entire scenario we are looking at is how we can breed these crops which would be surviving in the drought scenario, less rainfall scenario, and for different ecosystems of tribal agriculture, hilly regions, and for the plains where they become part of their culture. Therefore, globally, if we look at whether it is Africa or India or Southeast Asia or China or you go to USA, They are all there, but only thing is we consider them to be with a kind of stigma that they are of low value. But now today we understand their value in terms of the fact that they are highly nutritious. That's how we are looking at the alternate grains, which provide us better nutrition and good health and good life. And it is good for the farmers. Why I am telling is basically that they are the insurance in themselves, because they complete their life cycles even in the severest of the drought situations, yet they provide grains, the fodder, and the store. That is what the livelihood security would need. But with the millet mission coming in the with the government of India support in 14 states we are working with, we are trying to bring them to the glory of the fact that mainstreaming them in the governmental programs, providing the food in terms of convenience as the global database on millet food products, what we could see today. This all will make them more prominent, and our search for alternate staples would end with the millets, because they will provide you good health and good life for the society. So this, with this preamble, I'm handing it over to Venkatesh Bhat, who would be talking to you on the specifics of what these millets are in terms of the fact that how they are good for the farmer and how they are good for this planet. So over to Venkatesh Bhat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I think I started the sharing of slides. Am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, please.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I think Dr. Vilas A Tonapi has summarized about what it is to have millets and how they are good for planet and farmers. So at IMR, because we exclusively work on millets, we try to have the millets cultivation to be transformed from subsistence farming to a commercial focus on a global competitive mode through improved and sustainable production technology, value addition and marketing, and to make use of the multiple utilities that these crops offer. Yeah, these are, as you know, millets are called as resource smart and climate smart because they can manage with the minimum resources as well as they respond well to more resources. And here we have C4 crops which are highly adaptable and they are efficient biomass producers. So because of high biomass, we have high grain yield as well as high fodder yield. And also for as a biofuel, we find that the millet such as sorghum is a very potential candidate which makes less use of water and provides maximum biomass. Then we also have hybrids in these crops which are high yielding, which give 30 to 50% more yield than varieties. So these are all having implications for farmers to make a profitable farming using millets. And of course, there are multiple uses already Dr. Tonapi talked about. Then they also provide a sustainable food solution in a changing climate because these are all dryland crops which are dependent on rain and they are grown in the marginal soils with very less water and very less fertility as well. And ironically, these the climates which are very harsh in the sense they have very high temperature wherever things like permanent are grown, they are also really any other crops will not grow in such climate, but the pearl millet grows. And there are also some hilly climate where we find that most of the small millets, they grow and give good yield even for a short duration. So these are all adopted for small holder farmers production system. That's an advantage for millets in Asia and Africa. So we see that most of them, they produce from seed to seed in 60 to 90 days, and a few of them they maybe they will take up to 100 and 120 days compared to other fine grains, and they adapt to wide range of soil conditions and also fertility levels. They respond to good fertilizer inputs in improved farm condition, and they also make good use of fertilizer and water whenever it is available, and above all this also gives biodiversity on the farm, so that reduces the pest and climate risk for the farmer, and the farmer's stability of the production increases. So to summarize about the goodness of millets, they take less and give more. They take less in terms of resources, and they give more in terms of the nutrition and also the sustainability. And I think this is about some of the data about the requirement of water for different crops, wherein we find that sorghum and pearl millet, they have, and also finger millet, they have very less water requirement. And the world production of different millets, if we look at, we find that the maximum contribution to production is from sorghum, which is about 67%, and then pearl millet is about 24% contribution. So this is in terms of the production of around 95 million tons each year the world produces. And of course, this is 2016 data, but the overall change is not much during last 3-4 years compared to, say, for example, earlier last 10 or 15 years there was more change, but now it is last 4 years it's not so much changing. And then if you see, most of the countries are growing these millets. So sorghum is grown in 91 countries, and the pearl millet in 40 countries, proso millet or common millet in 36 countries, mostly in Europe, Russia, and those regions, and foxtail millet in China and other countries. And if you look at the yield per hectare, it is also higher. It's more than 10 tons for most of the crops. The highest is in foxtail millet in China. That is followed by the finger millet. Most of it is in India. Then we have proso millet and sorghum, which is again grown in more than 36 or 91 countries. So the productivity range is fairly good, and but we find a lot of variation across nations. Then how it is good for farmer. This summarizes all the good things about how it is good for farmers. They are short duration crops. They have very low water requirement and ensure yield under less rainfall. And they make good contingent crops. If there is a failure of any main crop, then they can grow millets. And important nutritional fact is that they are naturally organic. So they have premium price in markets in the developed countries and also in urban clusters in developing countries. And they also provide green and dry fodder in for the farmers, because most of these dryland farming is integration of animal as well as the crop component. So animals also get the fodder, the green as well as dry fodder. So this is an important important contribution of millets. Then for environment, they are good because they enhance the resilience of agriculture in terms of income and livelihood, which is not affected because they are photosensitive and they are threefold crops. There are some photosensitive varieties also developed because they are suitable. Say, for example, we have post-rainy season sorghum in India, which are photosensitive, but then that is to increase their adaptability for such conditions. Then they also withstand high temperature and they have low carbon and water footprints. And there is an important point is that there is no major pest and diseases that require hazardous inorganic chemicals, but then challenges often come. That's why it's a near absence. Say, for example, we had a fall armyworm infestation in India, and we find that right now there is no other method other than chemical control of this pest. Then there are, we also have data to show that the energy intensive cereals like rice are not so farmer friendly compared to the millets. So we see that the fertilizer and the machinery which are presented here, they are least required for finger millet and pearl millet and sorghum compared to, say, rice or wheat or maize. So that is the how energy intensity is not there in millets. Then also the greenhouse gases. If you see the emission of greenhouse gases, it is more in rice and wheat and then maize. Then come all the millets. So that way we find that millets are both farmer as well as environmental friendly. So from a farmer's perspective, why grow millets? Farmers, they don't grow millets all over. but they grow in such patches where nothing else can grow, or they find that it is very convenient to grow millets in such patch. So basically it's non-chemical. They don't have to spend much on fertilizers or pesticides, and they also maintain agrobiodiversity. Mixed farming is also very much in practice in different parts of the world, where different millets and other crops are grown together. Then there is no need of irrigation, and the porous soils are okay. And they are traditionally adapted, so there is no need of having any energy input. So it's a zero energy input. They fit well in zero input agriculture, and they also offer nutritional security, water security, and livelihood and ecological security. Then we also find that in the future, the production of different crops such as wheat and rice are being affected based on the data what we have from the empirical models or crop yield weather data models. We find that the wheat is threatened because of climate change, and the rising CO2 levels are also affecting the nutritional value of C3 food crops such as rice, which is a reason for concern. And African countries are increasingly turning to rice consumption, and there is a shortage of rice in Africa already, who are importing it from Asia. And even in Asia, we find that there is a decreasing rice yield, especially in places like Japan. And then the crop yield weather data also shows that precipitation and temperature are which are in the change the climate scenario, they seem to favor millets such as pearl millet, and even rainy season rice is becoming more vulnerable to climate change because of erratic rains and lesser rains. So then maize and sorghum, they seem to be having advantage because they are replacing rice in many locations. Then economically, we see that because rainfall is a key factor in the yields levels of millets, so there is a significant effect of rainfall alone, because these are all water saving crops. So it makes sense that wherever we have a poor soils and rainfall, whether it maybe it's erratic, is available at intermittent stages, they can be the millets can be grown. And so it is good for farmers again in this scenario where the climate change is driving the change in the cropping pattern. So finally, what can make the millets good for farmers and society is to have these traditional crops as the value proposition foods, value-added foods to adapt to modern food habits. Then organic cultivation and consumption, which is coming up in many crops of the many parts of the world, and the climate change resilience, technological advances in the millets, post-harvesting and the food processing. I think this I'm not touching because this may be covered in other sessions. Then inclusion of millets in the governmental programs on subsidized food and food grains. So, for example, in India we have midday meal scheme and public distribution system. So millets are being included. Dr. Vilas A Tonapi talked about the millet mission. So in India, Indian government has planned for an investment of around 2,000 crores over 5 years in the millet mission as a precursor to the upcoming international year of millets in 2023. Thank you. That's right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Venkat and Dr. Vilas. Very useful, good scientific data there. I have a question for both of you. So first of all, Dr. Vilas, if I can ask you, so IIMR has been very unique and innovative in that they've started from a production institute and moved into the whole agribusiness side as well. And you started your presentation with saying that that we have for growth in the industry, it has to be driven by generating demand. Now, I've always struggled myself with how do we balance this chicken and egg situation? We need to drive demand, but it needs the supply. And if we drive supply, we don't have the demand there. It's an issue as well. And then we'll get price fluctuations, and then it's difficult for farmers. So how do you think this should be tackled in moving forward? We know there's going to be growth in the industry. So how should we tackle this during this time to try to ensure we don't have as many fluctuations and balancing the supply and demand? What role should the government play? What role should researchers play or other stakeholders? How can we reduce the risks that the farmers will be very much exposed to? Thanks, Dr. Vilas.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. I think this question is universal in nature for the fact that how we are going to balance the demand and supply scenario, and how governments can help and what institutions can do. So this three-pronged strategy involves the basic idea of creating markets, bringing them into a real picture. All these grains lost their prominence because they did not see any market where to dispose of. So earlier days, it was basically a sustainable livelihood for which it was produced. But today, whether it is urban or rural ecosystem, both are looking for these alternate grains. So if you see the Indian scenario only, we are skewed in terms of supply by 40%. So there is a demand, but the supply is limited. That's how the prices are very, very high. So that's how the government has come into picture to see that these millets are also taken to non-traditional states, non-traditional areas, non-traditional agricultural ecosystem production systems. So for example, how we can really mainstream them in terms of diverse agriculture, that is also is an issue for government of India. For example, Punjab, UP, Bihar, it's a wheat and rice cultivation system. So there is no diversity in agriculture. When the water itself is coming down, governments wants that diversity in agriculture should also improve. So we feel that as an institute, our job is to evolve better varieties and hybrids which withstand climate vagaries and become more relevant to the climate change scenario, plus build ecosystem of entrepreneurship around them and the business opportunities for these millets, so that consumer who wants these grains in his food plate would get these supplies from the areas that will come from the non-traditional areas. For example, in Punjab, our sorghum yields are to the tune of 7 ton to 8 tons, and also from the rice fallow areas. In the foxtail millet or small millets, average is less than a ton. If we go to the one irrigation plus ecosystem, it increases to 3.5 to 4 tons. So that is how the production ecosystem also can be balanced. So pushing these crops to non-traditional area is also the key. Governments should involve the states in demand generation, awareness creation, better diversity in the food plate, involving all stakeholders, institutions, research institutions, agriculture departments, the consumers, this what you call the industry, plus the what you call including the people who are in the service for hotel industry, chefs of the industry. So create diversity, create interest, create culinary what you call attractiveness, so that it attracts from children to the what you call the elders, so that our food plates are diversified and we get better nutrition from these millets. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Vilas. That was a good insight. So you're saying there's multiple initiatives that can be taken on both sides, on the demand side and the supply side, and we need to push with all of those. Okay, very useful. Thank you. Dr. Venkat, if I can ask you two very quick questions. We've got to be a bit careful on time, and I may ask these same questions to our African colleagues later. The first question is, what do you think is the potential to further increase the yields of millets and sorghum, and what may be the main hindrances or hurdles to doing that? So what's needed to achieve it, or what's stopping it being achieved, and how much potential is there still that's untapped? So that's on the yield side. And then on the other side, as part of the concerns in agriculture has been monocropping. Do you think, now we hail millets and sorghum as being particularly good for the planet, but is there a risk that millet and sorghum may also end up being monocropped, and then there could be negative effects there? So over to you, Dr. Venkat.
Thank you, Dr. Joanna. The first question, that's about the productivity and the global productivity, most specific focus on African nations perhaps. And what we find, especially in these crops, sorghum and pearl millet, we have hybrids which have very high potential. Dr. Tonapi just now he said we get up to 7 tons in resource intensive cultivation. So the potential is already available in these crops, whereas that is not so much available in other millets. For example, in finger millet, it is lower. We get up to 4 to 5 tons. It's only varieties because we still don't have hybrids. And also in foxtail millet, China claims to have hybrids, but then we don't have in any other countries. Then in other millets, we still don't have improved varieties. So the hybrids are far away. So the yield levels are most in, if you take of Africa, where sorghum and pearl millet and fonio and teff, I think they are the major millets. So in the first 2 crops, hybrids are available. Chris et al. Has done a lot of work in developing and adopting these hybrids in different African nations. And wherever it is adopted, the yield levels are higher. And so one of the important things may be that the hybrid seed production and adaptation for particular African countries that need to be worked upon more intensively, because every country has a specific cultivation condition and a season, and also utilization. So that needs to be worked out, but then potential is already there for these 2 crops. And yeah, the second part of the question is about the monocropping, whether these millets also lead to monocropping. Yeah, this has to be, this is in somewhat contradictory to the first one, I should say. So if you look at the productivity per se, then monocropping is very good. People want to have more crop per area. But if we wish to have a biodiversity, so then we should not have monocropping. But if we don't have monocropping, that means there should be more than 1 crop in a particular farm or particular area. So because each crop has different nutrition requirement, different crop duration, and different kind of growth conditions. So one of the crop at least is going to suffer when we go for a mixed cropping or any other such conditions where we don't want to have monocropping. So that had been our traditional way of agriculture in most of the countries, where we have mixed cropping and different crops in the same farm, and that doesn't give the highest yields that we need to have. Whereas that gives good adaptability, and it ensures against any failure of rains, any adverse conditions like flood or drought and so on. So we have 2 challenges in millets. One is we have to have varieties which are suitable for mixed cropping system, where farmers just want to grow a millet and get a good decent crop, maybe for family consumption. And the second thing is about intensive cropping, where people are looking at producing more millets per area and then go for value addition and consumption and go into the different markets, global markets, and sell them and make them popular. Yeah, I think that answer.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, very good. So we design for the multiple cropping and other sides. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Vilas and Dr. Venkat. Very, very insightful and helpful.